The room was in chaos. Toys scattered across the marble floor, baby bottles rolled under the golden sofa, and the sharp cries of 3 identical toddlers echoed off the walls of the mansion. A woman in a wrinkled uniform ran down the hallway, her hair in disarray, clutching her purse like her life depended on it. "I can't do this anymore," she screamed, pushing past the butler. "Those kids they're impossible. Please, Mrs. Green," the butler begged. "At least wait for Mr. Collins to return." But she didn't. The door slammed so hard the chandelier trembled. In less than 3 months, she was the 5th maid to quit. The billionaire's triplets, Noah, Nathan, and Natalie, had broken another one. Just as the butler turned to pick up a toy car, a quiet voice came from behind him. "Seems like you could use an extra pair of hands." He looked up to see an older woman standing by the door. Her clothes were simple but neat, her eyes soft but strong. "My name's Grace," she said. "I heard you were hiring." He sighed, shaking his head. "Ma'am, you don't know what you're walking into." Grace smiled, stepping closer. "Maybe that's why I'm the right person for the job." And that was how everything began. How one woman no one expected changed everything inside that cold billionaire mansion. But what Grace didn't know was that behind those adorable faces of the triplets, there was something no one could explain. Something that made every maid run except her. Welcome to stories where wealth meets humanity and every moment reveals the unexpected. Subscribe now for more powerful billionaire stories that will move and inspire you. Before Grace arrived, the Collins mansion had already become infamous among the staff agencies in New York. No one lasted more than a week caring for the triplets. Some said it was because of their tantrums. Others whispered darker things. Doors slamming by themselves, toys moving when no one touched them, and the sound of laughter at night when the children were asleep. Ethan Collins, their father, was a man everyone read about but few ever met. He was the kind of billionaire who didn't like being seen. A widower at 37, he built his empire in silence after losing his wife, Claire, during childbirth. Since then, his heart had turned cold, and his mansion colder. The triplets were the only things that connected him to his past, and also the reason his home was never peaceful. On the day Grace arrived, Ethan had just fired the last nanny. The hallway was filled with broken glass and crayon drawings on the wall. Nathan had poured juice into a flower vase, and Natalie was sitting in it like it was a swimming pool. Noah was nowhere to be found. Grace looked around calmly, her hands folded before her. "Quite the welcome," she said with a small smile. The butler, Mr. Jacobs, whispered to her, "They're spirited. You might want to reconsider." Grace bent down, gently taking Natalie's sticky hand. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "you'll catch a cold sitting there." The little girl frowned. "You're not the boss of me." Grace chuckled. "Not yet, anyway." She grabbed a towel from the nearby counter and began drying the child. Nathan stared, waiting for her to shout or scold, but she didn't. Instead, she hummed, a soft tune that filled the hall with calm. Moments later, Noah appeared from under the dining table, dragging a small photo frame. "This is Mommy," he said shyly, showing it to Grace. She knelt beside him. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "You must miss her a lot." The boy nodded. For the first time, one of the Collins triplets smiled at a stranger. From the staircase above, Ethan Collins watched in silence. His expression was unreadable, but for a brief second, something in his eyes softened. The first week was a test of patience. Grace cleaned, cooked, and chased the triplets around the enormous mansion while keeping her calm through every mess. They hid her shoes, dumped flour in the kitchen, and even locked her outside once. Still, she never raised her voice. Instead, she'd say, "If I get angry, I lose, and I never lose." The children didn't know how to respond to that. They were used to yelling, threats, or tears, but not quiet strength. Each night, when the mansion went silent, Grace would walk into the nursery and hum softly until all three fell asleep. Sometimes, she'd look at their faces and whisper, "God, give me strength. There's something about these kids, something heavy on their hearts." And there was. One stormy night, Grace woke up to the sound of crying. Not the usual kind, but a sharp, frightened cry that echoed down the corridor. She rushed into the nursery and froze. The triplets were all awake, sitting upright, staring at something by the window. "What's wrong?" she whispered. Natalie pointed with a trembling hand. "The lady's back." Grace's eyes followed the girl's finger, but there was no one there, only the wind rattling the window pane. "It's just the rain," Grace said, forcing a smile. But Noah shook his head. "No, she comes when it rains." Grace tucked them back in, her heart pounding. As she turned off the light, she saw it. 3 small handprints on the window glass, larger than the children's. She stepped closer. The marks were wet from the inside. She whispered to herself, "What are you, little ones?" The next morning, Ethan returned from a business trip. Grace met him in the dining hall, where the kids were eating quietly for once. He blinked in surprise. "They're calm." Grace smiled. "Children reflect what they see, Mr. Collins. Sometimes they don't need control, they need care." He didn't respond but gave a faint nod. There was something about Grace that unsettled him. Maybe it was how she could step into the chaos of his life and bring peace, even when he couldn't. For the next few days, things improved. The triplets began to laugh more, fight less, and even nap on time. The mansion started to feel alive again. Until the night of the thunderstorm. The triplets wouldn't sleep no matter what Grace tried. They kept asking her to stay close, saying, "She's coming again." Grace held them, whispering softly, "No one's coming, my loves. You're safe." But the power went out. The lightning flashed, lighting up the nursery for a split second, and that's when Grace saw it. A woman's reflection in the mirror behind them, standing close enough to touch the children. Her dress was soaked, her eyes hollow, and her lips moved silently, as if trying to speak. Grace spun around, but no one was there. She turned back to the mirror. The reflection was gone. Her heartbeat quickened. She held the kids tighter. And then, from the hallway outside, a voice whispered through the dark, soft and sorrowful. "Why did you leave them?" Grace froze. The voice wasn't hers. It wasn't the children's. It was coming from the portrait of Claire Collins hanging on the wall. Her painted eyes seemed to glisten in the lightning's flash. And at that moment, all 3 triplets began to cry in unison. The mansion shook as thunder roared, and Grace realized she wasn't the only woman trying to protect the billionaire's children. The other one had never left. The storm outside raged through the night, hammering the windows with rain as thunder rolled across the sky. Grace stood frozen in the nursery, clutching the triplets close to her chest. Her breathing came in shallow bursts. The voice, low, mournful, and unmistakably female, still echoed in her mind. "Why did you leave them?" She turned slowly toward the portrait of Claire Collins. Lightning flickered, illuminating the painted face. Soft brown hair, gentle eyes, a faint smile frozen in time. Grace stared at it for a long moment, her mind racing. "It's just the wind," she told herself. "Just the wind and my imagination." But the sound of quiet sobbing behind her made her spin around again. All 3 children were trembling, tears streaking their faces. "She's angry," Nathan whimpered. "Mommy's angry." Grace's heart tightened. She knelt and pulled them close, whispering, "No, sweetheart. Your mommy could never be angry at you." The little boy shook his head hard. "You don't understand. When the thunder comes, she talks." Grace didn't know what to say, so instead, she hummed the same tune she always did, the one that calmed them. Slowly, their cries softened. When they finally fell asleep, Grace stood and looked once more at the portrait. "Mrs. Collins," she whispered softly, "if you're watching over them, please, help me understand what's happening." The storm began to ease, and the silence that followed was heavy and strange. Grace stayed in the nursery all night, afraid to leave them alone. By morning, the sky had cleared, and sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the mansion. Ethan Collins came down to breakfast with his usual distant expression. His black suit was pressed, his hair neat, his voice calm, just like every other day. "Good morning," he said, sitting at the table. "Morning, sir," Grace replied, pouring him coffee. The triplets were unusually quiet. They sat in their high chairs, pushing pancakes around with their forks. Grace could see the shadows under their little eyes. Ethan noticed too. "They didn't sleep?" "Not much," Grace said carefully. "The thunder frightened them." Ethan nodded slightly, taking a sip of his coffee. "They've never liked storms." "Not since—" He stopped himself. "Well, never mind." Grace wanted to ask what he meant, but his face closed off completely. The subject of his late wife was clearly still painful. After breakfast, Ethan left for a meeting downtown, and the mansion fell quiet again. Grace took the children out to the garden, hoping some sunshine would lift their spirits. The triplets ran through the wet grass, chasing butterflies and laughing again. It was the first time Grace had heard that sound since the night before. As they played, she sat on a bench nearby, watching with a soft smile. But her mind was far away. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful billionaire story. The voice, the reflection, the wet handprints, none of it made sense. Grace had worked in many homes before for many families, but she had never seen or heard anything like that. When she looked up again, Natalie was standing near the rose bushes, holding something small in her hand. "What do you have there, honey?" Grace asked. Natalie walked over and opened her palm. Inside was a silver locket, old and slightly tarnished. "It was buried," she said, "right where Mommy's favorite roses grow." Grace gently took it. The front was engraved with the initials CC. She opened it carefully, and her heart skipped. Inside was a tiny photo of Ethan and Claire, smiling with their newborn triplets wrapped in blankets. Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. "Where did you say you found this?" "Under the red roses," Natalie said. "The ones that don't grow anymore." Grace looked toward the far end of the garden. The red rose bushes there were indeed wilted, their petals dry and colorless. She stood, clutching the locket, and a strange chill crept up her spine. She didn't know it yet, but that locket would change everything. That evening, Grace cleaned the nursery while the triplets played quietly on the floor. The room smelled faintly of lavender and baby powder. The toys were neatly arranged again, the chaos replaced by calm. She glanced at the portrait on the wall. "I found something today," she murmured. "Something that belongs to you." She placed the locket gently on the dresser below the painting. As she turned to leave, she thought she heard a faint sigh, almost like a whisper of thanks. She froze, then looked back. The curtains swayed even though the windows were closed. Her skin prickled, but she refused to run. "If you're here," she said softly, "I'm not afraid of you." Later that night, after the triplets fell asleep, Grace went to the kitchen to make tea. The mansion was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels too heavy to be normal. She was about to pour hot water into her cup when she heard footsteps. Small, quick ones. She turned and saw Noah standing at the kitchen door in his pajamas. "Sweetheart, what are you doing up?" Grace asked gently. The little boy looked pale. "I heard her again." Grace knelt, brushing his hair back. "Who, darling?" "Mommy," he whispered. She said, "Tell him the truth." Grace's breath caught. "Tell who the truth?" Noah's lip trembled. "Daddy." Before Grace could say anything else, the lights flickered and went out. The entire mansion was plunged into darkness. Noah grabbed her hand tightly. "She's here." Grace held him close, her heart thundering in her chest. "It's just the power, baby. Stay with me." But then, somewhere upstairs, a door creaked open, slowly, and another slammed shut. Then the sound of a woman crying echoed through the halls. Grace's knees nearly gave out. She knew that voice. It was the same one she'd heard during the storm. She scooped Noah into her arms and hurried toward the staircase. As she reached the second floor, the crying grew louder, leading her to the nursery. When she pushed the door open, her breath froze. The locket she had placed on the dresser was now lying in the middle of the floor. The portrait of Claire Collins was trembling on the wall as though someone had just touched it. Grace whispered shakily, Mrs. Collins? What do you want from me? And then, as lightning flashed through the window, she saw it again. Claire's reflection standing behind the children's cribs, her face filled with sorrow. Grace couldn't move. Her whole body went numb. The ghostly figure lifted a hand and pointed toward the locket. "Find the letter," the voice whispered, almost too soft to hear. Before Grace could respond, the lights flickered back on. The reflection was gone. She fell to her knees, trembling, clutching Noah close. "It's real," she whispered to herself. "She's real." Just then, the bedroom door opened. Ethan Collins stood there, his face pale. "What's going on?" he demanded. Grace turned to him slowly, her voice shaking. "Mr. Collins, your wife is trying to tell us something." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" But before she could answer, they both heard it. A faint thump coming from inside the wall behind the portrait. Another thump, then another, as if someone or something was trapped inside. Grace's heart raced as she backed toward Ethan. The sound, thumping, deliberate, and unmistakable, echoed from the wall behind Claire Collins' portrait. It was as if something was trapped, trying to get out. The triplets clung to Grace, their small hands digging into her arms, their eyes wide with fear. "Ethan," Grace whispered, her voice trembling, "you need to see this." He stepped closer, his usual composure gone. The billionaire who had faced hostile boardrooms, cutthroat deals, and market crashes now seemed powerless in the face of something he couldn't explain. "It's just the house settling," he muttered, but even his voice lacked conviction. Grace shook her head. "No, listen." The thumping continued, growing slightly louder with each beat. Grace reached for the portrait and carefully lifted it off the wall. Behind it, the plaster was cracked, as if someone had been clawing from the other side. A faint draft of cold air escaped the cracks, carrying with it the faintest whisper. "Help me." Ethan's eyes widened. "What the hell?" Grace knelt, pressing her ear to the wall. "It's coming from inside." Nathan, ever the brave one despite his fear, peered over her shoulder. "Mommy?" he asked softly. "Is it her?" Grace swallowed hard. "I think it is, sweetheart. I think it's Mrs. Collins." The three children huddled close as Grace slowly examined the cracks. Her hands brushed against the wall, and a piece of plaster crumbled into her palms. Behind it, she could see something, paper, folded tightly, tucked inside a cavity. She looked at Ethan. "We need to get it out." Ethan hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Grace said firmly. "Whatever she wants us to find, it's important." Together, they pried open a section of the wall just big enough to pull out the folded papers. Grace unfolded them carefully. The letter inside was yellowed with age, but the handwriting was clear. It was Claire's. Her eyes scanned the lines. "Ethan, if you are reading this, I need you to know the truth. The triplets, they are special. More than you or anyone else understands. They are sensitive, able to sense what others cannot. They can feel emotions, see shadows, and hear voices we don't notice. That is why the maids keep leaving. They fear what they cannot explain. But they are innocent. They are gifts. You must protect them, not punish them. Please, Ethan, trust the woman who will care for them in my absence. She will see them. She will hear them. And she will help you love them again." Grace's hands shook as she held the letter. Ethan read over her shoulder, his usual mask of control slipping. "Special sensitive?" he muttered. "That explains everything." Grace nodded. "All those maids quitting, the strange noises, the things we can't explain. It's not the kids being difficult. It's them reacting to things they can feel." Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Are they ghosts?" he whispered. Grace hugged him tightly. "No, baby. Not ghosts. Just memories and feelings we can't see." Ethan ran his hand through his hair, pacing slightly. "I thought I was protecting them. I thought I was supposed to shield them from the world. I didn't realize—" His voice trailed off. "You were protecting them from yourself," Grace said softly. "From your grief. But they need more than protection, they need understanding. For the first time in months, the house felt lighter. The children laughed softly, a sound that had been missing for far too long. Grace looked at them, smiling through her tears. She realized then why she had been drawn to this family. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. The next few days were different. Grace spent hours teaching the triplets to express their feelings, to describe what they sensed when shadows moved or voices whispered. She encouraged them to draw pictures of what they felt, to speak without fear. Slowly, the house transformed. Ethan began to participate. At first, he was awkward, unsure how to interact with the children beyond providing for them. But Grace guided him, showing him that his love didn't have to be hidden behind strict rules and schedules. The mansion, once cold and echoing with chaos, now felt warm. One evening, as the sun set behind the mansion's glass windows, the triplets played in the garden. Grace watched from the porch, sipping tea, when Ethan joined her. He didn't say much, just stood silently beside her. Finally, he spoke. "I never realized they were trying to communicate, not with me, but with anyone who would listen." Grace smiled. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give children is to simply hear them, to see them, to believe in them. Ethan nodded, a rare softness in his eyes. "Thank you, Grace. I don't know what we would have done without you." Before Grace could respond, a sudden chill swept through the garden. The triplets stopped playing, looking toward the house. "She's back," Natalie whispered, her tiny hand reaching for Grace. Grace felt a shiver run down her spine. Claire's spirit wasn't gone. It had returned, but this time it seemed urgent. A sudden gust of wind slammed the front doors open, and the locket Grace had found earlier flew from her pocket, landing near the rose bushes. It flipped open on its own, revealing the tiny photograph inside. Then, from the house, a loud crash echoed. Grace froze. Ethan's face went pale. The triplets clung to her tightly. Something inside the mansion had moved, something strong enough to knock over furniture without a sound. Grace knew in that instant that the mystery was far from over. Claire's message had begun, but it wasn't finished. Lightning flashed, illuminating the mansion. Through the windows, Grace could see the silhouette of someone, or something moving inside, just beyond the hall. The children began to cry, but Grace held them close, whispering, "I won't let anything happen to you. Not now, not ever." And then, from the second-floor hallway, a voice called out. Not the whisper from before, but loud, clear, and full of sorrow. "Find the room. Find what I hid." Grace's heart pounded. She looked at Ethan, who was staring at her with wide eyes. You heard that too?" he asked, his voice shaking. Grace nodded. "We have to find it. Whatever she hid. It's the key to keeping them safe." The mansion fell silent for a moment, as if holding its breath. The storm outside had faded, leaving only the echo of Claire's message ringing in their ears. Grace clutched the triplets close, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. But she wasn't afraid. Not really. She had faced chaos before, and she had learned something important. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from empathy, from patience, from listening when no one else will. And she would need every ounce of that strength for what was coming next. Because in the shadows of the Collins mansion, the truth was waiting. And it wasn't going to reveal itself easily. The mansion was quiet. The storm had passed, leaving a crisp stillness in the air. Grace stood in the grand hallway with Ethan, holding the triplets close. Their small hands clutched hers tightly, eyes wide but trusting. The house that had once been filled with chaos and fear now felt alive. Not just with people, but with something else. Claire's voice had guided them to a hidden room behind the library, concealed by a sliding bookshelf. Inside, they found journals, letters, and photographs detailing her life, her love for Ethan, and her careful observations of the triplets. Each page revealed the truth. The children's sensitivities were extraordinary. They could sense emotions and energies that most adults could not, but they were innocent, pure, and needed guidance, not fear. Grace read aloud the final letter from Claire, her voice steady, carrying over the room. Ethan, my love, I have left this for you and for them. These children are gifts, and they will need someone to listen, to care, to understand them. The maids who quit, they couldn't see their hearts. But Grace will. Trust her. Trust the love that surrounds you all. Protect them, not with rules or fear, but with understanding and patience. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He knelt beside the triplets, wrapping his arms around them. I understand now, he whispered. I was trying to protect you the wrong way. I see you, I hear you, and I will never stop. The triplets smiled for the first time in weeks, their laughter bubbling through the room. Noah hugged his father tightly. Nathan clung to Grace, and Natalie kissed the locket that had started it all. Grace felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had stepped into a house of fear and mystery, but through patience, kindness, and empathy, she had changed everything. She realized then that her role wasn't just as a caretaker. It was as a bridge between love lost and love restored. From that day on, the Collins mansion was no longer a place of chaos. The triplets thrived, guided by the gentle hands of Grace and the love of their father. And though Claire's spirit was never seen again, the warmth of her presence lingered in the house, a reminder that love and understanding can overcome even the deepest shadows. Ethan looked at Grace one evening as they watched the children play in the garden. You saved them, he said quietly. And you saved me too. Grace smiled softly, the first real peace she had felt in months settling in her heart. We saved each other, she said. The mansion, once haunted by fear and mystery, now pulsed with life, laughter, and love. Every maid who had quit before would never have understood. But Grace did. She understood the power of patience, empathy, and courage, the true forces that could tame even the most impossible challenges. And in the hearts of 3 extraordinary children, the world was finally safe again. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more emotional and powerful billionaire stories coming soon.